They laugh at the man who sits alone. They whisper, he has no friends. But they don't see the fire he's building in that silence. You see, people think having no friends is a curse, but for some, it's a calling. A man with no friends doesn't waste time explaining himself. He learns to listen to the only voice that matters his own. He doesn't seek validation, likes or applause, because deep down, he knows lions don't need a crowd to remind them they're kings. He walks alone, yes, but every step is heavy with purpose. Every moment of isolation is a rep in the gym of the mind. Every lonely night is a chapter in a comeback story no one sees coming. While the world chases popularity, he chases growth. While others get lost in noise, he finds power in peace. They may call him a loner, an outcast, a nobody, but they forget a man with no friends is a man with no distractions. And that man, he is dangerous. He is the one writing at 3 a.m., training when no one's watching, building when others are sleeping, failing, learning, grinding, winning, not because someone's cheering, but because quitting was never an option. So if you ever find yourself alone, don't fear it, fuel it. Because sometimes being left out is life's way of pulling you inward, toward your destiny, toward the person you are meant to become. The man they'll one day write stories about, the man who rose from nothing, with no one, and still made them all watch. Loneliness doesn't mean weakness, it often marks the beginning of self-discovery, inner strength and personal transformation. When a man finds himself alone, with no friends to lean on, it can feel like a heavy sentence. The world around him moves in circles, clicks and crowds while he stands in silence. At first, that silence can be deafening. It can feel like rejection, like failure, like he's missing something essential. But here's the truth that no one says out loud, that silence is the first true mirror life offers. In that mirror, you don't see who others say you are. You see you, raw, real, unfiltered, and what you find in that reflection can change your life forever. Most people are never truly alone. They're always surrounded by noise chatter, opinions, distractions, validation seeking. But the man with no friends, he gets something rare. He gets the stillness. And in that stillness, the inner voice that was once buried under society's expectations starts to whisper again. It tells him the truth. It reminds him of his dreams, his values and his potential. It pushes him to confront his fears not, hide them behind forced smiles and empty conversations. This isn't about hating people or choosing to walk away from connection, it's about what happens when connection isn't there and you learn to thrive anyway. Most people rely on others to tell them who they are, to remind them that they matter. But the man with no friends, he learns to generate his own light. He learns to be his own ally, his own coach, his own damn army. Think of the great minds who shaped the world. Many of them walked lonely roads, not because they weren't lovable, but because their path was different, unique, too intense for the average soul to follow. And so they walked alone. And in doing so, they discovered a power within that didn't need an audience. Solitude gave birth to their vision, their mission, their unbreakable will. The man with no friends begins to value his time like gold. No drama, no fake loyalty, no draining energy. Every minute becomes a building block for something greater. He studies when others gossip. He works when others party. He builds when others scroll. And slowly, without even noticing, he transforms, he sharpens his mind, he hardens his discipline. He becomes someone people once ignored then suddenly can't ignore. Yes, loneliness can hurt. It can break a man if he lets it, but it can also be his greatest teacher. Pain sharpens awareness. Silence amplifies vision, and the absence of company forces him to become the kind of person he never needed validation from in the first place. Because once a man learns to stand tall with no one beside him, he becomes unstoppable. When people do show up, he no longer depends on them, he chooses them, and that's power. The man with no friends is not to be pitied, he is to be watched closely, because the day he embraces the solitude is the day he stops being a victim and starts becoming a force. In silence and solitude, some of the world's greatest ideas, revolutions and legends were born. There's something profoundly powerful about the absence of noise. When the world quiets down, when the distractions fade and there's no one left to impress or respond to, a man is finally left alone with his own mind. And that space often feared, often avoided is the birthplace of something extraordinary. Most people run from solitude. They fill their calendars, flood their phones with messages and constantly crave stimulation. But the man who embraces silence steps into a different dimension. It's not that he's escaping the world, it's that he's choosing to face the one within him. That inner world, untouched by opinions, unshaped by approval, is where real creation begins. Throughout history, the turning points of human progress weren't always sparked in loud rooms or crowded stages, they were sparked in isolation. Alone in a cell, Nelson Mandela visualized a new South Africa. Alone in exile, Napoleon plotted a return that shook empires. Alone in a patent office, Einstein reimagined the very laws of the universe. These weren't moments of weakness, they were the incubation chambers of greatness. Silence doesn't mean nothing is happening, it means something deeper is forming. When a man has no friends, no audience and no applause, he starts to hear a different rhythm beat that's not coming from the world but from within his chest. That heartbeat starts to guide him. It becomes his metronome for action, for thought, for breakthrough, and in that space, free from social mirrors, he begins to ask the questions that truly matter. Who am I, really? What do I believe? What am I willing to fight for, even if no one claps? In solitude, ideas aren't filtered by fear, they aren't censored by judgment, they are wild, pure and unshaped by conformity. That's why the man who spends time alone often returns stronger, sharper and more focused. He doesn't come back with borrowed thought, she comes back with vision. He doesn't echo what others are saying, he speaks what others wish they had the courage to say. And the beauty of it is, this transformation isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It brews quietly, like water slowly boiling, like steel forged in heat. The man in silence becomes someone new, someone dangerous. Because he didn't just read books, he studied them. He didn't just meditate, he rebuilt his mind. He didn't just plan, he committed. Alone, in a world constantly screaming, the man who finds strength in silence is rare. He's the one writing when others are talking, he's the one listening when others are arguing. He's the one thinking 10 steps ahead while the world gets distracted by noise. And when he finally steps forward with his idea, his project, his mission, he doesn't need to explain, he shows. And suddenly the man they overlooked, the one they said had no friends, becomes the man with the blueprint, with the clarity, with the edge. Because silence, when embraced, doesn't empty you, it fills you. And the man who rises from it comes not seeking approval, but prepared to lead. When no one walks beside you, you either crumble or rise to become someone the world can't ignore. There comes a point in every man's life where the crowd fades, the handshakes stop, the phones go silent, you look around and realize nobody's coming, nobody's calling. No one's showing up to cheer you on. It's in that moment when the silence feels loudest and the weight of solitude feels heaviest that a choice must be made, crumble or rise. Some men give in, they let the emptiness consume them, they replay the betrayals, the abandonments, the rejections. They start believing the lie that their worth is measured by how many people walk beside them. But others take that same pain and turn it into fire. They feel every ounce of that abandonment and then use it as fuel. When no one believes in you, you learn to believe in yourself. Not because it's easy, but because it's the only option left. And when you stop relying on outside voices to validate your dreams, your path becomes clearer, your mind sharper. You stop waiting for a lifeboat and start building your own damn ship. It's in those lonely hours, when there's no audience, no applause and no support, that discipline is forged. You wake up not because someone told you to, but because you told yourself to. You show up for your goals, even when no one is watching, because you understand something most people never will. True strength is built in private. The man who rises from being alone becomes dangerous not to others, but to the limits that once held him back. He is no longer paralyzed by fear of rejection or failure, he's already lived through both. And he's still standing. That kind of resilience can't be taught in classrooms or found in books. It comes from experience, the kind most people try to avoid. When no one walks beside you, you begin to walk differently. Each step is heavier, but it carries more meaning. Every decision matters more. You start trusting your instincts. You begin to see how much you were capable of all along, and slowly something shifts. You stop feeling sorry for yourself. You stop resenting those who left. You even stop chasing approval. You realize that walking alone gave you something they never could control. You control your time, your energy, your mind. You start choosing your direction, not based on where others are going, but where you are meant to go. And eventually, the world starts to notice. Because a man who walks alone and keeps going becomes impossible to ignore. People begin to ask, how did he do it? But they weren't there when the lights were off and the nights were long. They weren't there when the doubts screamed louder than hope. They didn't see the inner battles, they only see the result. And that's the irony, man who had no one beside him becomes the one everyone wants to follow. Not because he asked them to, but because they saw what he became when he had nothing. This isn't a tragedy, it's a transformation, a quiet one, a brutal one, but one that leads a man not to bitterness, but to greatness. Now you know the truth. A man with no friends isn't weak, broken or lost. He's simply been handed a different patha, harder one, yes, but also a far more powerful one. Because when life takes people away from you, it's not always punishment. Sometimes it's preparation. It's not rejection, it's redirection. You may not have someone to call right now, no one to meet for coffee, no one texting to check in. That hurts. But that pain is a signal, it's a doorway. It's the voice inside whispering, now is your time. You see, the world teaches us to fear being alone, as if solitude is some kind of failure. But look closely, the man who's always surrounded by noise never hears himself think. The man who constantly seeks company never learns to stand. And the man who can't bear being alone, he'll always be a prisoner to the crowd. But you're still here, you're walking through the fire, you're feeling every ounce of the emptiness and you're still moving. That's not weakness, that's strength in its purest form. Unseen, uncelebrated, unshakable. The truth is, not everyone gets this chance. Not everyone is forced into the wilderness, but those who are and those who stay long enough to listen come out different. They don't just survive, they evolve. They become sharper, quieter, more focused, more grounded. Their minds become weapons, their hearts become steel, their vision becomes unstoppable. It's in the silence that you start to craft your comeback. It's in the quiet that you hear your future calling. And it's when you're alone that you realize everything you thought you needed was already within you. And don't think for a second that this journey ends in loneliness. Number, because when you rise from the ashes of isolation, people start to notice. The very ones who doubted you start to wonder. They see the difference, they feel the energy. You don't chase anymore. You attract, not because you tried to prove yourself, but because you became yourself. You stopped asking for permission, you stopped trying to fit in, you stopped diluting your power just to be accepted. And in doing so, you became the rarest thing in this world, someone who knows who they are even when no one's clapping. That's the man the world can't ignore. That's the man who doesn't need friends to have impact. That's the man who turns solitude into strength, pain into purpose, and silence into success. So, if today you feel forgotten, overlooked, alone remember this: you are not finished, you are not defeated, you are forging. Right now, in this very moment, you are building something unshakable inside you, something no one can take, something most will never understand. Let them laugh, let them doubt, let them walk away. Because the man who walks alone today is the one they'll follow tomorrow. And when that day comes when your name echoes through rooms you once weren't allowed in, when your presence commands respect without saying a word, you won't need revenge. You won't need validation. You'll just smile, because you'll know you made it, alone but never broken.